Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Maspeth Federal. This, I think, is our 6th or 7th first-time home buyer. You will not have come here twice. At least you shouldn't. You shouldn't be a second first-time home buyer. So this is new to you, but it's something we've done a couple of times. So I really appreciate you coming out on a hot night, and I really appreciate you joining us and hearing a little bit about the process. And what we'll do is we're going to run through the process, and the talent, I'll let them introduce themselves, but talent is in a place on the dais here along with the home buying process. So you have your agent down on the end, Sal Carfazzi. We have our engineer, Chris Koch. We have our legal expert here, Barbara Pryor, our attorney. We have our credit expert, which is Akshay Mahindra. He works here at Maspeth Federal. And then Dorota Jankowski is our one of our heads in our origination department. And my name is Glenn Rudswick, and I'm the Chief Lending Officer. So I'm going to pass the mic down to Sal, and Sal's going to kind of talk about himself a little bit, give a little introduction, and then he'll talk about the first steps of your home buying journey.
My name is Salvatore Crafassi. I'm doing this, well, I started when I was 19. I'm 68, so figure it out, almost 50 years. I want to thank Maspeth for putting this together, and I'm sure you're going to learn tonight a few things on how to buy a home for the first time, or maybe the second. Hopefully, when you buy the first, you might buy a second one. On your folders, I left you what we call a seller's buyer's cheat sheet. Now, if you look at the way the process goes, is obviously you see a house with a sign, or during an open house, or advertised on the net. You call up the agent that's handling the sale, and you make an appointment to see it. But before you do that, normally before you start looking, you should get what they call a pre-qualification. Because most deals are predicated on getting that. So in other words, you can't submit an offer, and more than likely the agent that's dealing with you will ask you that as the first question is, do you have a pre-qual? And the pre-qual basically is a way of finding out based on your income, your credit, and what you could afford in payments to buy the home. Obviously, the rates went a little crazy now, and it seems like a lot of people decided that I might wait, the rate's going to go down. But I found out through the years that when you start waiting, it's almost like an excuse not to buy. Obviously, we're not used to these high rates, but just to give you, again, I'm going back because I've been here a long time and doing this. When I first opened my office in 1979, the rates, believe it or not, I closed deals at 16 and 17%. That's how, almost like credit card rates. And people still bought. Obviously, the prices were lower, but obviously the income was lower. But people bought homes. And you really, again, I give you some background on how to purchase, but as far as some inside information and how to make a decision is you can't keep stalling. Once you make a decision to purchase, you should basically start looking at the areas you're looking to focus on. The communities, the schools, and where you want to raise your family or purchase your home. From there, that's when you start calling the agent. They'll call you if there's a pre-qual. Once you see it and you're interested in the property, basically, the way the law has changed, and there have been a lot of changes in the law, is that there's what they call, if you look at the second one, it's called a seller or buyer's disclosure. Basically, the agent you're calling that's listing that property he's obligated to the seller, not the buyer. There is a lot now that there's a lot more coming in as buyer's brokers, which means that you hire an agent that represents you, because in reality, the agent that you're calling represents the owner. So he can't tell you what the offers were. He can't tell you what the market price should be. His job is to basically represent the owner and try to get the best price possible. So, and that's mandated documents that has to be signed every time you speak to an agent. If an agent doesn't do this, the broker gets fined $1,500. So it's mandatory, and this way you know yourself that who is representing you. I'll go through these forms a little quick, and then I'll go back to the process. This other form here is anti-discrimination form. That's another form that's got to be mandated by the state. So when you go in, you say, why do I have to sign all these documents? I didn't even look at the house yet. But technically, the law states that these should be signed before you view a home. Then there's one more. Then there's the last one is a lead paint, and I'll get into that later. Now, going back to buyer's broker, they just changed the law because the National Association got sued, and they paid a lot of money for that suit. And I don't like what they did, and when I understand the law, I'm not happy with. But basically what they're saying is that you have a buyer's broker, and I'm the listing broker, and you want to come out look at my home as a lister, I don't have to let you in it, because that's what the law is saying. Because in reality, you should be paying the broker, the buyer's broker yourself. Before that law came into effect, it was more like, let's say you went as a buyer's broker and I'm the listing broker. What would happen is that the offer would be submitted and a broker would put the commission as part of the offer. So in other words, let's say it's 6%, which is not, but let's use that number. And they turn around and they tell the listing broker, I'm offering $100,000 with 3% paid to the seller from the buyer's end. That stopped. It's a new law. I'm still looking into it, but that's something that you have to consider if you do hire a buyer's broker. Buyer's broker basically will tell you what the comps are, what the market is, and certain things about that. They'll find out about the home. They're there to protect you. But I think based on what's out there between attorneys, engineers, and banks, there's a lot of people that will make sure that nothing goes your way in a sense, because you look at the bank has to do the appraisal on a property to give you the mortgage. So already they're the ones telling you what the price is, because without them appraising it, and if you apply and the appraisal comes in too low, the bank's not going to be happy. Then you have engineers. They come in and check the house. Then you have attorneys. They'll check the documents to make sure you protect. So these are things that, that will happen in the beginning stages. So let me confuse it a little more and go back to cheat sheet. Now, once you get the offer and you see the house and you're interested in the house, you make the offer, usually what happens is that you would order a home inspection. That's normally done before you go to contract. So what happens is you get an engineer, like this gentleman here, or an independent person. They come and they check the plumbing, heating, walls, make sure there's no mold, and so on and so forth. Asbestos, anything that's wrong with the house, that engineer's report will be given to you, as well as if there's issues, the seller will get the same report, and they'll make sure that a lot of times what happens, it creates a second means of negotiations. So let's say the roof has issues, and normally a roof is 10 years old, and he says it's only 2 years left. Doesn't mean that the owner's going to put in the roof, because the owner's obligation is to make sure it doesn't leak. Boiler, all these other things that might have an issue could be negotiated before you go to contract with the seller, depending on the activity on a home, and depending on how hot the house is, or the price that you're offering, the owner might be flexible. So once you look at it, you like it, you make your offer, you get an engineer's report. At that point, once that all is done, then at that point, you have an attorney that handles the contract. She'll get into that as well, but that's the next step. After you get the contract, everything is signed by buyer and seller, then you go to a bank, and that's when you apply for a loan. Because normally a bank will not take an application without a contract of sale. As you see the cheat sheet, there's some of it is off, as far as the way it happens. The other thing you need, obviously, is insurance. You have to start looking around to get your own insurance for the home. And once the contract is signed, you get application in, you get your commitment, At that point, your attorney will order a title report. The title report will make sure that the property is free and clear and doesn't have any easements or encroachments, and they do a survey to make sure that the property dimensions are equal to the deed. And that gets given to the bank, and the underwriter looks it over and sees what's going on with the title report to make sure they see there no issues with it. At that point, they set up a closing date, and then you're a proud owner of a new home. There's a new law that came in on this year. Prior to that, it was what they call seller disclosure. Seller disclosure before was that the owner would say, I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. The buyer would get a $500 credit, and we're done. Now there's a new law that every owner has to fill out what they call a full blown out seller disclosure, stating everything that they know and understand that's wrong with the home. So normally that is done prior to you signing the contract.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christopher Koch. I'm a PE licensed by the state of New York and a couple other states. It only counts in New York. So welcome to this mortgage forum. The most important part after you meet your realtor is you want to get a house inspection. This is probably the biggest investment you're going to make in your lifetime, and you should have an advocate for you, and hopefully it's an engineer or it's a licensed home inspector that will take your cause and look at your house as if it was their own house, and then give you all the defects that they find, plus the positive notes. There's other things too. It's not just defects. How do you know if the house is in a flood zone? Okay, the engineer will check a flood map and see if you're in there. That would give more cost if you're in a flood zone because you have to have flood insurance. And then you also want to know what your base flood elevation is, that first floor. Because the last thing you want is, you may not even be near the water, okay, but you may be in a flood zone. And that's just the way the insurance works. So that's one thing that can be helpful. But let's say, as Sal said, you need a new roof, or the roof's got 12 years old. Let's say a roof is good for 20 years, okay, and that's an average useful life cycle of a building component. And you only got 12 years on it. You don't really have much negotiation room, okay? Let's say your boiler is a steel boiler, and it's average useful life cycle of a boiler is 35 years, all right? And the house is 40 years. Now, that boiler is a candidate for replacement. Did it go yet? No. But it's always about who pays. The owner knows he's got an old boiler, and you may not know it till you get the engineer's report. And now you're saying, you know what? I don't want to spend the $10,000 for a boiler later on. Let's talk about this. So your real estate agent or your lawyer, they'll bring this up and says, my client says we got to talk based upon the engineer's report. Here's the benefit of negotiation, and I might have mentioned to one or two participants here. Suppose there's $20,000 worth of repairs in a particular home, and you're aware of this, okay? If you can negotiate half of that, or all of it, okay, that translates into a lower price by $1,000, $20,000, $10,000, and that may turn out to be $5 or $6 per thousand that you save on your monthly mortgage payment. So let's reduce it to what it costs for $1,000. So for a $20,000, let's say, negotiation, all right, do whatever the current rates are here, it'll probably come out to be $120, okay? Now, $20,000 is on a house today. Most engineers can find a lot more. Will it be acceptable to the owner? Depends. If it's a hot house, the guy's going to say, you guys go walk. All right, but if there's an opportunity to negotiate, this could save you money monthly for the next 30 years. All right, so I want you to think about that. It's $120 a month that you're saving for the next 30 years. That's a lot of trips to the diner that your wife and yourself could be making, whereas you can't make it if you're paying $120. So the negotiation part and using the engineer's report, and if nobody wants to negotiate, and it took some of the shine off the house, and maybe this is the first house you looked at, it sharpens you up to look at the second house to buy. Okay, maybe that one fall through, so there's just too much exposure here. And then your eye gets sharpened, your mind gets sharpened. So now you're go hot for the house, okay? And you're gonna be on the hunt. And so, just from the first engineer's report, it's gonna help you pick out that better house in better condition and look for certain items. And so we talked about what should we get as far as negotiations. Doesn't happen all the time, but at least, I used to say to my clients, a young couple, that I want you to stay married. I don't want you getting in a house where there's just too much to do. Okay, you need to focus on being young. And so that's how important the engineer's report is. Let's talk about the pricing on what to expect out there from an engineer's report. It's all over the map. It could be $500 to over $1,000, but it also depends what's included. Okay, it could be just a straight building inspection report, but then there's add-ons, a termite inspection. Maybe this particular inspector also does mold inspection, and maybe put a couple of test strips out there and have it tested. If there's asbestos, you may want to have that tested. It could be visually identified, but it means nothing until there's a test. And then usually for something like that, the owner would be responsible for, or we negotiate. So that's what'll happen with the cost. And I recommend that you go for an ASHI home inspector, and it's we'll call it, it's like leveling out the home inspectors. They have minimum requirements, which includes maximum experience. And these guys are all regulated by ASHI, which is the American Home Society Inspectors and something like that. And American Society of Home Inspectors. And there's actual website, ASHI.com. And you go there, you find somebody in your neighborhood. That's you talk to the guy first. Just don't call him up and say, hey, what can you do for me? What's the price? Most engineers want to be helpful. They want to make sure that you get a house. Nobody wants callbacks. Say, what's this? But boom. Okay, nobody likes surprises. I want to talk about what is a home inspection. Okay, because I don't want you to unrealistic expectation of what the inspector can provide. First of all, nobody's there to open up walls and this on it. Then, when we are there to research the clues that are being presented to the engineer, or the stain, an odor that may be in the house, maybe in the bathroom, just to all in there, see whether it could be visual. On basements, perimeter of the house, how would the lead of pipes draining in the soil? Is it too close to the foundation in that spot that seems to be moist? This what I call a bounce test. That just kind of lean on your heels a little bit, and everybody, you don't need to be an engineer or inspector to do this, but get in the middle of a lawn, give it a little with your heels, little bounce. And if it's too much deflection, it may mean that this undersized, this little joist, a little worse, like these termite grit. And a lot of times you can't see the termites, okay, because everybody's got completed basements, finished basements, so the finished materials of everything. The average inspector will look for any of those open areas that he can see, maybe around a window down there. Appliances are tough to judge on. Okay, so most likely you're going to want to put your own appliances in there when they're old anyway. So I don't take too much stock in appliances, but I do take stock in central AC. I do take stock in heating units, and I do take stock in waste pipe. For instance, a lot of the homes that are older, especially in the older neighborhoods, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, there's still some galvanized waste pipe, okay? And that's always troublesome after 50 years. What happens is it corrodes from the inside, and so you want to replace that, and that could be expensive if you have to open up a wall. So your inspector should be looking out for outdated materials and that what needs to be updated. There's also different code items that you may not be aware of that the inspector is, and I'll just throw one out there. Any more than 3 steps or 3 steps and more requires a handrail, because that's considered a staircase. 2 steps, no. Okay, so Everybody's got 3 steps without a handrail, okay? But you need to know about it because somebody falls on them steps and they don't have a handrail, it's your nickel at that time. So that could be a negotiation point, all right? We talked about boilers, 35 years for steel, go 50 for the old cast iron. The new cast iron is 35 years. AC units, where the condenser unit is on the outside, okay, it's an average 12 to 15 years, but I've seen people get 20 years. But you want to know what your exposure is, and that's why you hire the engineer. And it doesn't mean, here's one that I know Sal and I talking about, and is it may be said that the engineer shoots down the first house so he can get to the second house, okay? That may be true with some guys, okay, with inspectors. But I used to always tell my clients, don't call me. I says, if you feel that there's some conflict, I said, don't use me. And I said, so if you got a guy like that and, you know, and you got the real deal, then and you're comfortable with him, then you use him again. But usually the first house, if you have a good engineer and it tunes you up to say, maybe this house a little bit more money I have to put in it down the road than I anticipated. And that's really what you're trying to protect against by using an engineer. And you don't want to be 6 months into the house and then, you know, as a husband or wife or a couple, a partner, say, what the heck did we do? All right. It's supposed to keep you in the spirit of owning your own home and negotiating the right price.
Yeah, but I mean, you would buy a used car without having somebody take a look at it first, right? And I think that's the point. You know, you look at a house, and if I can put myself in your shoes, if my wife and I were looking at homes, and we would fall in love with this house, and what's emotional at that point. We've had this emotional events that you've been looking for this finally found a house, like we still keep that raise your kids in, or you're going to live for 30 years in, and it's really nice to have that objectives look. The worst thing that during this process is that a home inspection is not necessary. That's the worst thing that does you a disservice, is that it's not necessary. In my opinion, it's 100% necessary, because you, as an individual, generally, some folks out there, but you as an individual generally don't know what you're looking at that could really cause you a serious.
Well, it also depends on the condition of the home. You know, you could tell some people that at a pride in the home, they make sure that the house is somewhat taken care of. You know, and I'm sure when you buy a home, you're going to do the same thing when you own. Because you don't want to, if something is anticipating that's going to go bad, you might as well do it right away than an emergency. If you have the time to do it before, you could call 2 or 3 contractors to fix the issue.
Yeah.
But when it happens and the boiler breaks, you got no choice. You got to get the first guys to do it, and you got really no negotiating tool with the contract. So these are things that he brings up, and sometimes the price might be lower than you anticipated because it's something that needs fixing, and you're willing to do it. But it's always good to try to figure and take care of the problem before it breaks, because then it gives you more time to fix, more time to shop a better contractor so you can turn on.
Yeah. So now you've met your agent, you've looked at this house and you really fell in love with it. You met your engineer. The engineer gives you a report that you can live with, or you've negotiated with some of the points that the engineer has now come up with. I've actually seen that in my experience where an engineer will come up with some things and you're able to work with a seller to come to an agreement. Well, hey, listen, the roof's going to be $14,000, $15,000. Let's knock $70,000 off the price and we'll split it somewhere. I've seen that in my experience. And now you've been through that process. So maybe we want to move towards contract, and maybe Barbara can start to apply a little bit about how you go into contract, what's the important things you see in contract, and the next steps in the process.
More they were into that as well. And as agents, if there is an issue that is very, you can't argue with, at the end of the day, we usually advise the seller that if this person came up with a boiler being replaced, I usually tell them you're going to get the same thing from another buyer. So at the end of the day, if there's an issue, it's my job to make sure they all understand that even though Mr. Smith is saying that blah, 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 there's something wrong with the home, I usually say it's going to be the same thing if Mr. Jones comes in, because at the end of the day, they're going to have the same, they're going to get another engineer's report. They're going to come up with the same problem, and you got to deal with it again.
That's a good point.
So you might as well just, and that's what I tell myself to realize, let's close the gap, make the deal happen, because you're going to have the same problem with the next client.
That's a good point, sir.
Okay, so I would just like to reiterate how important the home inspection process is, because New York, like other states, many other jurisdictions, is a buyer beware state. So when you get the keys at closing, that house is on you. So you have to know not exactly, but you have to know pretty much what we're getting in for. Even though they have this new disclosure form that requires the seller to fill out a few pages worth of information about the house, there were columns there that say unknown, unknown, unknown. And most sellers don't want anything to stick to them after the closing, so they're checking off unknown and unknown. The statute also doesn't seem to have too many teeth in it, in case there is something wrong. And it also has in its preface, or in the notes to the statute, it says this should not be deemed a substitute for a buyer doing their due diligence. So bottom line, it's buyer beware. No matter how many disclosures the seller fills out, you need to be comfortable with the condition of the house. So that's why the inspection is so important. The contract will say, the standard contract says that the seller is responsible for the plumbing, heating, electrical being in working order as of closing, and the roof not leaking as of closing. But again, that's only up to the close. And if something does break, they have to fix it. They don't have to make it better. They don't have to make it beautiful. They just have to kind of plug it up until closing and the keys are exchanged. You have to be careful about that. You have to make sure the seller hasn't crossed out that clause. You want to make sure that they are at least going to be responsible up until the date of close. I'd also like to bring out the point of new construction. If you're buying new construction, you do get some warranties from the seller, but new construction has its own pitfalls because there are some shabby contractors out there that don't do great jobs. So if you are going to be buying something that's new, from the contractor, see if you can check out other houses that he's done or other projects that he's done to get some idea. Maybe you can ring somebody's doorbell if you have to make sure this is a good solid builder. Legal occupancy. You may look at a house and it looks like it's a two-family because it's got 2 kitchens and 2 baths and 2 doorbells, but it is possible that it's been converted without permits by the seller. So you need to find out from the seller what kind of paperwork they have. Same thing if you see decks or extensions on the house, see what kind of paperwork the seller has. They may not have anything because the house is old. You may have to ask your attorney to make sure that the contract says that they promise that they will deliver the paperwork as necessary. You may have to have somebody check the building department, but you kind of need to know whether you're buying a legal to or through family or not. And the tax bill, I just want to tell you, is not a guarantee of what the legal occupancy is. The tax bill just shows you how the city is taxing it. What counts is what building department says. Finished basements, full kitchens and full bathrooms and basements. Again, a lot of owners have done that without doing any paperwork. You've got to see what they've got in terms of permits. Most people don't. They didn't bother. You have to decide then if you can live with that. Is the city going to come and knock on your door? Probably not. Unless they decide they want to do a blitz, maybe. But most people have full kitchens and bath, and you're not harried by it by the building department, but you know, that's going to be a decision that you make based on your own conflict zone. Water is turning out to be a little bit of an issue. It used to be like any other utility. The seller would call the water department and say, I'm selling the house as such and such a day. I need a final unit, just like you call Con Ed, National Grid. And normally the water department would say, okay, you've got an outside meter, not a problem, give us a day, we'll give you a lien. They're doing that sometimes now, but now a lot of times they're saying we have to come make an inspection. So you say, okay, come make the inspection, and they give you a date. They say they can't come any sooner than 6 or 7 months down the line. By that time, the house hopefully the house will be sold and you're in it. Then who's responsible if the water department comes and says, You need this, you need that, you need something. So it's a little bit of a tricky issue these days. We're not sure exactly how it's going to shake down, but it's something we need to talk about with your attorney and vis-a-vis the seller. If can't get it done before the closing, who's going to be responsible afterwards? Let's see. So that's some bad news for today. Now we'll talk about the good part. Your contract, once you all get together and all sign it and you put down your 10%, the standard contract will give you X amount of days to get your mortgage commitment from your bank. Usually it's about 45 days. Some sellers try to narrow it down a little to about 30 days. But whatever it is, once you get your signed contract, you go to the bank to get everything started. So good. If indeed you really try to get that mortgage, and you should know this by now because you'll have spoken to your mortgage person ahead, but for some reason you're denied, you will get your money back. That's what the contract says. If you have made a good faith effort and you have done and submitted everything the bank has asked you to do. If you've done everything the bank has asked you to do, after some unforeseen reason you're not approved, you will get your loan back. Right. It says make a prompt, accurate, and diligent application. Right. There is one glitch I want to call to your attention, though. If two people are applying for a mortgage, I mean, be a husband and wife, a friend, whatever, both people want to buy, both people want to be owners. But if one person is not qualifying to get the mortgage, then only one person should be on the contract, because there's a case out there that says two people sign the contract, then turns out only one person applies for the mortgage, and then the whole mortgage thing is denied. The seller made a case that he didn't want to give back the down payment because he said, I relied on two people applying for the mortgage. So if one of you is not qualified, speak to your banker and then say, look, what we'd like to do is nevertheless put our persons, have one person on the contract, and then please put the other person at least on the deed at closing so that they can still be half owner even though they're not on. The other way around that is to ask the seller if they will make the contract contingent on just 1% applying, even though two people want to buy and be owners. Title report. A lot of people say, why do I have to pay title insurance an extra $3,000 or $4,000? Why do I need it? Because if there's a lien out there against the house or a tax judgment or anything else and nobody knows about it, when you go to sell it, if it's out there, it's on you. So it's like any other insurance policy. You'll probably never need it, but you have to have it. That's one of the expenses along with the closing. You'll have a title bill of about $15,000 for most people, but that includes mortgage tax. The big part of the title bill is mortgage tax, and that's about 2% of the mortgage you borrow. So that's the big chunk. The title insurance itself is probably about $3,000 or $4,000, and then there's little things like recording fees and city this and city that. Well, it kind of just, but that's your big other expense.
So now you're in contract. That's great. Actually, is our credit specialist. Credit, you can start checking credit to be, then credit can be something that you want to keep an eye on. But even before you get to contract, but actually I'll describe it a little bit about what you would score and how that affects the process.
Thank you, Glenn. So good evening, everyone. My name is Akshay Manager. I'm the credit manager here at Maspeth Federal. So I just want to rewind for a second. We're looking for houses, but we have to know our finances first. So what Sal mentioned earlier was a pre-approval. First of all, you want to apply for a pre-approval before you even buy a house or look at houses. You want to know, what is a bank going to qualify you for? How much of a down payment do you have? Have you checked your credit? Is your credit report acceptable or not? If it is, put the application through. Highly recommend everybody check their credit at least once a year. Annualcreditreport.com. When you're ready, apply with the qualified lender that you feel comfortable with, knowing their products, and Dorota and I will talk about that. When you apply for a pre-approval, the banker or the bank you're working with will let you know what is the max loan amount we can offer based on your down payment and your credit and your debts and your income, how much of a purchase price you can afford. So that's critical prior to even looking for houses. It's nice to window shop, but first, work with the lender before you proceed. So I'm going to hand it over to Dorota so she can talk about the mortgage application process briefly.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for coming. My name is Dorota Jankowski. I'm a mortgage originator supervisor here at Maspeth. And I want to tell you a little bit about our first-time home buyer product that we offer. and a little bit about our mortgage processing progress. We offer first-time homebuyer program to individuals who are purchasing their first home, of course. It could be 1 or 2 family. It could be a condo or co-op, and the purchase price cannot exceed $999,000. For the first-time homebuyer, we offer a discount, which is 0.25% off from the rates that we offer. We offer 2 types of loans. Both of them are fixed, which means that the payment cannot change during the time of the loan. So we offer 15 years and we offer 30 years. Our loans are open. You can always prepay our loans with no penalties. You can also pay them off earlier with no penalties. We require the requirement for this program. We can put as low as 5% down payment. But if your down payment is lower than 20%, you are required to purchase what it's called private mortgage insurance. And please do not confuse private mortgage insurance with house insurance. They are 2 different insurances. Private mortgage insurance, maybe actually can talk about a little bit later. It's based on a lot of factors.
As you pay down your mortgage, and this is true not just at Mass, but this is good information for you to have it for any bank that you go to. But if you have to do private mortgage insurance because your down payment is, for us, less than 20%, the private mortgage insurance starts to burn off as you gain equity, as you pay down your mortgage and gain equity in the house. You can ask for, in fact, we'll give you a date. Maspeth gives you a date as to when private mortgage insurance burns off. Also, if you go a couple of years in the house and you think that your house has gained in value, you may approach your lender and say, hey, my house is now worth more, and I don't think I need private and mortgage insurance any longer. So just keep that. That's a very important piece because private and mortgage insurance is it's expensive. It could be a couple $100 a month, $300 a month, $400 a month, depending on your mortgage. So you want to move towards getting that off your monthly plate. Okay, sorry.
So the reason why they do that is because you get out of trading, and then if the value is more than less than 80%, then that's how they get less in mark, basically, right, guys?
Thank you, so absolutely.
So they're not gonna do. They do it automatically at some banks, but you have to basically get another appraisal and people can do it and say my house is not as it was worth 100. I bought it nicely, but now the house is worth 120.
Yep.
So now your 80% is based on 120, which bring the digging. Just fit up so you can money insurance.
That's right. Okay, so let's.
Thank you, Sal. Okay, so I told you a little bit about our program, but now I want to tell you a little bit about our loan process. So you should be all excited because you are purchasing your first home, and now it's time to get a loan. At the same time of the excitement comes a lot of questions. You can be stressed out because you don't know the whole process, and that's where we come, meaning the loan processors here at Maspeth. I just want to add that our staff speaks a lot of languages. So if there is any language barrier, it's not a problem. We speak a lot of different languages at loan origination. So we are more than happy to help you if that's an issue. So you have signed contract and you want to apply for a mortgage. We have 3 ways that you can do that. First and the easiest way, which is our website. You can go to our website and submit application online. And I think it's a great tool because you can do it at the vicinity of your own apartment. You don't have to go out anywhere. You don't have to physically talk to anybody. So you can apply on our website. And when we receive that application on our end, one of our processors will pick up the application and start the processing. The other option that we have is you can actually get the application either at our loan center and fill it out and mail it back. Or the third option is to just walk in and speak to one of us, and we'll be very happy to help you and guide you through the whole process of even filling out the application. So if you are not sure what to put in certain fields or how to fill out the paperwork, we are here to help. When you submit the application, one of our loan processors will pick up the application, like I mentioned before. And because it's a primary residence, you're purchasing your first home, we are obligated to send you a documents which are showing you estimated closing costs. Okay? When you receive that those documents, you have to review them, of course. If you feel comfortable proceeding with the loan, you have to sign them and return them back to you. Like I said, if it's through our website, then you just have to e-sign everything and send it back to us. If it's a hard copy application, then unfortunately you would have to come in again and see us. When we receive those signed documents, we start processing the application. In the meantime, we order the appraisal, and then credit department takes over and do the financial qualification. Correct?
If you apply, and if you attended this seminar, and if you apply within the next 90 days, we'll say 90 days, Maspeth will give you a free appraisal. So that'll cut some of your closing costs.
So now I'm going to give back to Akshay, and then when Akshay is done with his part, I will add just a few things.
So let me just reiterate what happened so far. One thing we skipped, I just want to rewind, right? Before you buy a house, right, you go for a pre-approval. You work with the lender, know what you can afford, what your finances are, what your credit is like, what are the terms, what is the rate, am I comfortable with this rate, what is the maximum purchase price? You work with the lender. Then you can go to someone like Sal, a real estate agent. Hey, I have a pre-approval. What can I afford? What do you have in the inventory? Let's say you work with Sal, you find a house. You now have a property inspection through a licensed engineer. You go to the property inspection, assuming there's no findings, you want to proceed. But if there are findings, you can negotiate the purchase price potentially. Now, you've negotiated the purchase price, everything is good. You work with a qualified attorney. It's actually required in your state. You work with an attorney to draft a contract. The contract has to be reviewed by your attorney as well as the seller's attorney. They could be a little back and forth, but let's say everything is resolved. You have a fully executed contract. Now you work with Dorota as the lender. You put the application with the qualified lender that you're comfortable with, that is probably the same lender that you got the pre-approval from. You work with Dorota, you put the application through. Dorota's team has processed the application, sent you the disclosures. Appraisal has been ordered, as well as credit underwriting. Credit underwriting is where the bank or the lender you work with is going to review your income documentation to make sure you qualify for the loan. Things may change throughout the whole process of purchasing the house. Highly recommend that during the mortgage process, do not take on any new debt. Do not change anything in your personal finances from when you started looking for the house. Make sure that your finances stay as is throughout the whole mortgage process. If the bank is asking you for documentation, tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, give it to them. Remember, if the bank doesn't have those documentation, how will they qualify your loan? Don't delay it. The more you delay it, remember, the contract has a time of essence. If you don't supply, most contracts have a mortgage contingency. 45 days or less is when you have to provide that commitment letter to the seller. If you don't, you may be in breach of contract, and your attorney and the seller's attorney may advise you of that. Assuming credit underwriting is complete, appraisal is satisfactory, you get something called a mortgage commitment letter. When you get the mortgage commitment letter, lender is issuing it to you, you send it to your attorney, you have satisfied the mortgage contingency clause. Now you're getting closer to closing. So essentially at that point, you're very close to the closing. And I think this would be a good time to open it up for questions if anybody has any.
So I know you've been throwing a lot of information, and obviously we're available for, we'll be ready for questions in a minute, but there's a couple of things I just want to add quickly. I know that rates right now are a barrier. I think we've all seen the rates go up maybe about 400 basis points, 300 basis points in the last 2 or 3 years. We're hopeful that that'll start to abate a little bit. In fact, you've probably seen it recently. Rates have come down just a little bit. That said, there are some good values still in this market that is great for first-time home buyers, and I think co-ops are a great way to get in, especially here in Queens, because usually it's a little cheaper. You do have to keep an eye on some of the extra expenses with a co-op, mainly the maintenance fees that are there. But generally, you can get in a little cheaper on a co-op when you're a first-time home buyer. It's a little more hoops that you have to jump through because you have to deal with the board, but Maspeth Federal does co-ops. I think it's a good entry level product to get into right now. Single family homes are very, very expensive. But there are some things that you can do. Maybe we can open it up for questions now.
Two, three things. I just want to add to what Akshish said that when you get the commitment is valid for 90 days. So you want to proceed with your closing as fast as possible. Also due to the fact that there is a contingency in the contract. Another thing that I want to mention, and I'm saying this from my personal experience, I think you should find a real estate agent who you are comfortable with. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions, either your real estate agent, your attorney, or your loan processor. This is your first time. You have right to ask questions. They are never stupid questions. And I think that will save you at the end a lot of stress and, overthinking. And if you have any questions regarding your loan process, you can always reach out to us. We are available whenever you need, and I highly recommend our bank to get the loan. And by the way, our rates are very, very super competitive. Thank you.
What?
Banks and institutions, but you will find that savings and loans are generally much less expensive than other places. Other places, especially if you go through mortgage brokers and things, they have extra fees. They have some junk fees. Sometimes that the local savings and loans or credit unions don't have. So it's very important, especially if you're working with mortgage brokers, to understand that somebody's got to pay them. And it's probably not going to be the bank. Somehow it's going to come out in higher rates, higher fees, or some other fees, someplace along the line.
Adds to that, right? We have no origination points and we have no processing fees. The only fees are the third-party fees associated with your loan, appraisal, title, attorney, stuff, fees like that. So we'll open it back up for questions.
And the other thing too with a mortgage broker, you look at the fact that they might try to sell you products that they're making more fees on. So it might not be, say, best interest. And it just takes a call. You call up the bank and say, I'm getting this and this rate. Could you imagine? And honestly, I have a lot of knowledge with them, and I've used some in the past. And I'm really, a fan of Maspeth Federal because I believe in local businesses.
We like IPNs of our. Does anyone have any questions?
What's the process for pre-approval like if you're trying to buy a two-family home, if you're buying it with another family?
Yeah, so when it comes to pre-approvals, when you do the pre-approval, you can put the pre-approval online. Whoever the applicants are should put their pre-approval request online. We will you'll get a disclosure authorizing us to run your credit report to all the applicants. When we run the credit reports, if you're buying a two-family, with the assumption you're going to owner-occupied, we'll look at your income versus the proposed loan, how much of a down payment, what is the interest rate we're going to offer, does your debt-to-income ratio qualify? If you're buying a two-family, you're going to live in one unit, rent the other out, we will give you credit based on the appraisal and market rate for that second unit. It will help as qualifying income in that purchase. So if you're
Going through buying together with another friend.
Yeah, so if you're buying it with another friend, both applicants should put that pre-approval request together. The originations team will combine those applicants together in one application and look at the combined income, the combined debts, the combined assets to make sure that, hey, does this family or two families qualify or not? The balance.
Any other questions? Oh, in the back here.
I'm a teacher. I give my teacher voice.
All right, what we got?
I have two questions. Is title insurance just a one-time fee? And then at closing, can you just describe what the closing process is just a little bit more and shows out?
Title closing is a one-time fee. You just pay it once. You don't pay it every year. It's not annual. You just pay once at the closing. All of those fees are just payable once at the close. Once everything is done and you've got your mortgage and the bank has done their final checking, they will want to make sure that you didn't change your job the minute you didn't come unemployed the night before the closing. Everybody gets together at the table and you will have to bring your check to the seller for what's over and above the mortgage, usually your other 10%, because when you sign the contract, you'll put down usually 10%. Normally, some might be less if you're a first-time home buyer or whatever, but whatever money you need to bring over and above the mortgage, you'll bring that with a certified check to the seller. You'll bring a check for the title expenses, also certified. The seller will sign all the documents to the house over to you. The title company will take it and check it and put it on record with the city. You will get a copy of the deed that shows you're the new owner of the house as of that date. And you'll get the keys. You won't be the new owner. I will say that sometimes sellers will put in the contract that no matter what the closing date is, they would like a week or 7 days to stay in after the closing because they want to coordinate their move. If you agree to that, and you don't have to, but if you do agree to that, they should pay your mortgage interest for those 7 days. They should pay the 7 days worth of taxes, water, so that you're not out of pocket for letting them stay in. And they should also leave money on deposit with their attorney so that at the end of the 7 days they're not out, they have to pay a penalty and you have some recourse to get them.
Going back to Bob, as far as the two families are concerned, as a broker, we have a service that any listings I get right now, because I want to make sure the house is being represented and it should be as the brokers. We do a CO search and we make sure if it is a 2 or a 3, because like Bob was said, people say it's the tax of the 3-family and it's got taxed on the 3-family. Believe it or not, the finance department doesn't care what the building department does. And the fire department, there's always different agencies, but believe it or not, they don't talk to each other at all. So what happens, the finance department walks around and sees 3 bells, 3 families. Meanwhile, the building department says legally it's a 2-family. So the owner says it's a 2-family, 3-family, I have to know. So I do a CO search. So when I put that listing on the market, I know that I'm representing the house as a 2-family if it is a 2-family.
Good. So to add to that, just to add to that, right? CO meaning certificate of occupancy. You as a potential buyer can actually go, if you're in the 5 boroughs near set department buildings, you can look it up yourself as well to check if the certificate of occupancy is filed. What is this house? Is it a 3-family, 2-family? Is it as advertised? And that's also a free resource you can check out.
And it's not violation.
Frank.
And so we talked a little bit about your mortgage payment. We have fixed rates here at Maspeth. There are other banks that do variable rates, but our rates are fixed, right? What that means is that your principal and interest doesn't change. Your payment of that piece doesn't change. But it's also important to note that real estate taxes get reassessed every year. So your payment may differ as you move along because real estate taxes, I won't say they go down, they go up. So your payment, you want to keep that in mind. The part that we really didn't touch on is you're going to buy your house and you're going to get into this house. You have to think about things that are a drain on your income that you wouldn't think about. Do I need landscaping? Do I need a lawnmower? Do I need, things that you wouldn't think about when you rent, all of a sudden become something that you have to think about. I have to shovel my own sidewalk. I'm not going to have somebody come do that. I found when I bought my first house that I needed things I didn't know I needed. A rake. I didn't know I needed a rake. I never needed a rake in my life. Those are things that you don't think about and are escalating. And property taxes and water bills are things that you may not think about because when you rent, sometimes you don't have those issues. So just keep that in mind as well.
Please read.
I was there one more thing as far as the values of homes. Kind of, doing this so long, I've seen the rates go, when the rates goes up, the prices go down. And when the prices go down, the rate goes up, or whatever it goes. After all these years, the market today hasn't changed. The pricing, believe it or not, have not come down. People turn around, and the reason why is because there's less inventory. So it's price and demand. So even though the rate is higher, and at first I anticipated that the prices were going to start dropping, but it seems like it did. They're going up, the values. We've sold many homes as well, and in this area, in my community that we sell, they're going to go down. And the reason being is that it goes based on demand. So if there's less inventory, and ends up being there's less buyers, which means there's less inventory. So usually that's what happens: less buyers, more inventory, less demand. But this time it's just not like then. There's less inventory and less buyers. So the prices are staying the same.
The gentleman in the back had a question.
That's a good question. As far as the pre-approval process, if it's bad credit or credit's not good, but it's high income, is that something that's overlooked from you guys?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
Yeah. So, but high, like $100, like $100 over, but not good credit.
Understood. So yeah, that's a good question. So what happens is that Maspeth side, we don't look at credit scores. We look at your payment history with other creditors. If there are derogatory items prior to applying, right, highly recommend you try to clean up your credit. If there's late payments, reach out to the creditors and say, hey, could this late payment be removed? File disputes if you see discrepancies on your credit report. If there are collections on your credit report, that's derogatory items, but you can get collection items removed. If you satisfy them, we'll work out settlements with the creditors.
Is this something that it's going to be translated toward me? Like, we can't approve you right now unless you fix it?
It all depends on the application. So we can make pre-credit decisions without a full application. So I would recommend, if you are looking for a pre-approval, put the application through, allow the lender to look at it. And if they can't approve it, they'll give you a resolution, say, hey, you know what? You have some collection items. Can you give us proof that you will satisfy these or have satisfied these, but you're working on removing it? We will take that into consideration when looking at your file. The income is a great factor as well as assets, but we don't differentiate credit scores based on, your rates based on credit score because we don't use that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Just be careful for the guys that come and say they correct credit.
Yeah.
A lot of them are schemers. So you see, I could fix your credit and drop and rate your credit score. I had a lot of complaints about it. I don't recommend them. Just be careful. I'm using that as a way of trying to bring up your credit score because a lot of them, you pay them and see like they don't pay. So be careful with that as well.
So there's a good website, the CFPB.org, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's good reading. First-time home buyers, know your rights. Know who you're dealing with when it comes to your credit and application, what disclosures are required. Great website.
And is there any other questions?
I don't really share one.
But
Regarding again with the pre-approval, how long does that process take?
so pre-approval is at Maspeth Federal, the pre-approval is fairly quick. 1 to 2 days, maybe 3 days. You put the application in today, let's say it's the end of a business day. Somebody from our team will reach out to you first thing tomorrow and say, hey, no, we see you apply for pre-approval. Just go over the information. That's the originations team. And then myself and our credit team.
Okay. Okay, I just forgot to mention one very important thing when it comes to rates. In a lot of banks, in order for you to keep the rate that you applied for, you have to pay points or you have to pay certain fees. The great thing about our bank is that we offer you the rate at the time of application. So there is no, you don't have to pay for it. As long as you apply, we guarantee the rate at the time of loan application. So that's a really big plus.
Should also add that, and you should also add that, let's say if you apply for Maspeth and the rates go down in a couple of weeks, right? Maspeth Federal being a portfolio lender, if you reach out to us and say, hey, you know what, on your website, the rate has gone down, but I applied at this point, could you reduce my rate? Absolutely, we will consider that and reduce your rate for the application. We don't have any rate lock fees, as Dorota mentioned, right? Some lenders offer rates, but they ask you to pay fees to lock the rate in and extend it. We don't have that. So we originate in-house, we underwrite in-house, we close in-house, we service in-house. So everything is in-house portfolio lender. Beginning to end, we're with you as the lender, and you're with us hopefully as a borrower.
Because the moment will not get a service. You won't get pushed number 3 for another robot. That doesn't happen here. You'll get a Maspeth person.
One last thing.
Yeah, sure, Sam.
Use the internet because years ago we didn't have Zillow, we didn't have Trulier. You guys, when you go look at homes and you want to get a value what they are, you got your information at hand. So when you go look at a home, you see the prices, there's all comparable sales, meaning the homes that were sold in the area. Everything's on the internet. So that's what we use when we try to market, when we list a home to try to compete with other homes. But you as consumers and first-time buyers, you got information that a lot of people back in the day didn't have. So do your homework, look at the comp, which means comparable sale of the home sold within the block, see what the price we're going. and then you got a way of deciding on what was. Good luck.
He's not a